I change my brain? Am I just a victim to who I am? I'm your host, Steve Sisler. Stay tuned for another episode of Behavioral Insights.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you tuned in. It's episode 16, and we're talking about outcomes. What outcome do you want, and what are you doing to get it? Next on Behavioral Insights. Right, let's get started. I had a call this morning, an employee calling from a company. This company's on a retainer with us, so we have sort of a hotline that people can call into when they're dealing with issues or whatnot. So I had somebody call in, and basically, let me just give you the type of person they are at first before we get into what the call was about. So the person is a stabilizing perfectionist. So a stabilizing perfectionist is very low dominant. So a non-aggressive style. It's called amiable. They're very logical. So amiability and logic, when you combine those two things, their brains sort of sit in the back seat of the car, or maybe you could say they sit as far back as being in the trunk of the car. So if assertiveness is behind the wheel, they're in the trunk. And so that's where the brain begins. So this is a super outer-directed person. So outer-directed people rely on exterior sources and inciting outside incidents to move them forward in the story. So think about story. What does story mean? What is story all about? A story is really a character who wants something and has to overcome great odds in order to get it. So that's story. So every good story has that fundamental aspect to the story. Rocky, Star Wars, Ben-Hur, the Christmas story is known as the greatest story ever told. Why? Because the Christ figure wants to save the world, has to overcome death in order to get it. So it becomes the greatest story ever told. Any story with an underdog is a real story. So the character is in the story, but typically the character doesn't move itself in the story. There has to be an inciting incident in the story to move the character forward. Remember Rocky, I think it was Rocky 2, there's a beach scene where Rocky... no, it's Rocky 3. So in Rocky 3, there's a beach scene where Rocky is fighting Clubber Lang, Mr. T. And he's racing Apollo Creed on the beach, and Apollo Creed basically is running backwards faster than Rocky's running forwards. Because Rocky has no incentive. He's just, he's got some issues. And there's that scene in the beach where his wife, who's passive, and Rocky's in a passive aggressive, she comes up to him and she goes, "I don't understand you. What's wrong with you? What are you doing? What's going on?" And he's kind of looking down, kicking the dirt, kind of a thing. And you've never given up in your life, this whole thing. And then finally, he breaks out of himself and he says, I'm afraid, all right? You want me to say it? I'm afraid. Okay, I don't know if you remember that scene. And that is the inciting incident in Rocky 3. And then after that scene, you hear the bell, boom, and and you get goosebumps because you're like, all right, here he comes, right? It's like that. Remember in Rocky, I think it was Rocky 2, when his wife is having the baby and she's, her life is threatened through the birth of the child. And she doesn't want him to fight because his retina has got some issues with his eye. And the whole thing is this back and forth. And he's kind of given up. He's going to just go get a job and blah, blah, blah. Well, she comes out of her coma. She's like, I think she was in a coma. And she comes out of the coma and he's looking at the baby and he's resigned to fighting at that point. He's not going to refight Apollo. And, she calls him over to the bed. And she says, I need you to do something for me. And he says, what do you need? And she says, no, come closer. And he leans down and he puts his ear to her mouth. And she says, win. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps right now and my eyes are fogging up. I mean, that's a story right there. That is a story. Okay, I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but I am literally wiping my eyes. Oh my God, I gotta see Rocky tonight. So good. All right, that's just magic, man. That is just magic. So anyway, where was I? I don't know why this is so funny this morning. Okay, the fellow that called in, he's amiable, passive. So I ran a little bit of math this morning before I got on this podcast. How many aggressive people in the world? So styles that would be considered aggressive. 7% of the population can be considered aggressive. It's not very aggressive. That's just aggressive. That's any form of aggression, even the lowest form. Okay? So if aggressive is between 1 and 10, we're talking a 1, a 2, or a 3, all the way up to 10. And out of all those people that fall into the category aggressive, 7%. All right. Assertive people, 17% of the population, roughly 17% of the population is assertive. What about passive aggressive? Noticeably passive aggressive. We're talking about the dogs you're not sure you can pet. 3% of the population is passive aggressive. How many are passive? You ready? 75% of the population has some sort of a passive style where there's complete inconsistency in anger. These are the amiables. Now, this individual is a passive, and he's a strong passive, which means his brain hunkers in the bunker. He lives in a barred castle. Emotionally, to get to know this kid, you got to cross the moat. You got to get past the drawbridge, the armed guards at the gate, get into the castle, find the room he's in, and break down the door. If you want to get to know this person, you're going to have to go through all that. So nobody bothers, right? It's too hard. So we just say hi and bye. So that's kind of the emotional makeup of this person. Their motivational makeup, highly theoretically driven, very curious. Other than that, they're a maintaining behavior type. They're a maintainer. They're not an obtainer. If they were a part of an airplane, they would be the wings. They're not the engine, and they're not the music. It's not super fun at all or anything like that. It's just sort of the wings. Although the wings keep the plane in the air, they have nothing to do with putting it there. So this is kind of where he's at. Now, when it comes to him wanting to be in charge of his life, yes, he has a little bit of that. But he tends to settle for what he can get. He never fights for what he wants. As soon as things start to feel like it's going to be any kind of a problem, any waves will be made, his brain wants to pull out the white flag and lay down, cover his head, and hope it all goes away. So that's the kind of person we're dealing with. So he calls in this morning, and I said, hey, let's call him Spanky. I said, hey, Spanky, what's going on, man? How was your week last week? How's your day going? And he sounds like this. Okay. I'm like, all right, that's bad. I mean, I didn't say, okay, that's bad. I'm thinking, okay, this is bad. I said, so what's going on? He goes, same old. I mean, I feel like I'm talking to Eeyore, right? You can tell the Eeyore types because their sentences fall down, all right? Same old, da, da. See, every syllable is lower on a scale of high or low pitch, okay? That's an Eeyore. How's it going? It's okay. Rather than great. Right? Remember Tony the Tiger? Great. It crescendos. So you start low and you go high. I have a relative, all right? A relative. And if you call her and you get her voicemail, this is what it does. Hi, you've reached so-and-so. I'm not able to take your call right now. If you leave a message, I will get back to you. God bless. So the whole time you're listening to this message, you're hearing da-da-da-da-da, 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 like that. Okay? That's chronic. It's a chronic form of passivity where their brain has succumbed to exterior circumstances and there's no way out. So rather than being in a well and looking up, they're in a well and they're looking down. That up doesn't work, so maybe there's something in the water here that'll help me out. And they just look down. That sounds kind of morbid, but that's the way it works, folks. So all his sentences were falling down, which was an indicator, like, this is not going well. So I said, I know what's going on for you here. I know he's dealing with an aggressive, so he's dealing with a 7%er. He's a 75%er, okay? And he's dealing with a 7%er. And he said, well, I said, well, tell me what's going on. Well, I wasn't getting, I'm not getting any direction. Well, you see what's happening here. I'm waiting for directions, but nobody will give them to me. Oh, so you're gonna stand outside in your yard because you need a job and you think the job is gonna pull up in the driveway. Like, that's how these people think that are wired like this person. So not every passive does that, but this passive does. So I'm waiting for direction. I'm not getting any. Well, who is he waiting directions from? He's waiting for directions from a 4%er. Okay, so this person is not only aggressive, he's a pure aggressive. Aggression is the only emotion in play, ever. And so they're task-oriented. Their brain is a future brain. All they're thinking of is what is next on my agenda so that I can get it done as fast as possible. Do you think for 1 minute he's looking around in his organization going, who needs anything from me? Are you kidding me? He has a taking brain. All right? Taking brains go get what they want, kill it, and bring it home. That's how they do it. So any person in that organization that wants something from this person, they have to interrupt them from their tasking. And passive people don't want to do that because it's scary. So imagine this image, if you would. Imagine a junkyard dog. A junkyard dog with one of those creepy, big, spiky collars on, chained to a tree, going, and you're going to go up to that dog and ask it to help you. You're going to go up to that dog and let it know that you're not doing well and you need some directions, right? Who's going to do that with that kind of a brain? Well, how about no one? So this is a scenario. But he has an ally in this organization, and it's the person that invited him into the organization and offered him a job. So notice, he didn't go get the job. He was offered the job. So this job actually showed up in his driveway. Right? So this is really perfect. But what happened was the person that offered him a job, because they were friends in school, blah, 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 he is also an aggressive. He's another 7%er, and he's the son of the dad. So like father, like son. So we're now in the genome sequence here. And 40 to 47% of who you are is in your genes. So we've got that case going on here. So what he did was he brought him into the company, and then he started tasking. So both him and his dad are tasking, and then he delegated his friend to the father and said, you take care of him, I'm busy. So this poor guy is just sort of in a canoe without a sail, paddle, or motor, and his boat is floating towards an island he doesn't like, and he doesn't know how to swim. So he's a deer in the headlights right now. So I said, listen, you got a couple choices here. Best choice if you plan on trying to work something out and doing something you might like to do and stay, go to your ally. So go to your friend and talk to him about this. He says, well, what do I say? How do I even begin that conversation? Okay, do you see this? He's not even able to say, okay, I'll go do that. Because he can't pull up from inside the kind of conversation he needs to have. Why? He's not inner directed. Directions for the conversation isn't coming from within. They have to come from without because he's outer directed. So not only does he doesn't know what to do, he wants me to tell him how to start this conversation because he doesn't know. Why? He's outer directed. He's waiting for directions. And if he doesn't get any, he just sits there. Does that make him a bad person? Does that make him stupid? No, it's just how he does it. Okay? It's a little unfortunate, but it's how he does it. So what am I going to do? Am I going to like wail on him because he's like this? I said to him, okay, here's how you need to start that conversation. You need to be honest, period, end of story. That's it. Just tell him the honest truth. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, okay, here's what you do. You go in and let's just say this guy's name, his friend's name is Tom. It's not, but we'll call him Tom for the sake of the conversation. I said, you go to Tom, you say, Tom, dude, this is not working out for me. Just like that. And he's going to say, what do you mean? You say, well, I've kind of been assigned to, your dad, and I feel like I come to work every day and get hit in the face with a hammer. Just like that. That's what I feel like. And I have no direction. So I don't know how much longer I can do this. That's it. And now the floor is his. So what he's going to do is if he wants you there, he's going to try to figure out what he needs to do in order to keep you. Because I said to him, the reason why he hired you is for your brain, because you're very, very smart. I said, but smart gets you somewhere, but it won't get you everywhere. Your personality and there's a lot of variables that get you the rest of the way. Smart gets you somewhere, but it doesn't get you everywhere. I said, so, this is what we have to do. You need assistance and you have an ally. You have a buddy that if you were in the battleground, he would run out into the field while 50 caliber machine guns are going off and drag you off. That's the kind of guy he is. Because I was there when he told his father that he wanted to bring you in. And the father just said, all right, if you say so. Just like that. He didn't question it, nothing. Now, I didn't know what this guy was going to be like at that point because I didn't have the profile or anything. This was the first I heard of it, and I happened to be on site when this happened. So anyway, I said, you got to go to him, be honest, tell him exactly how you feel. Now, that was really daunting for him because he's got the big, giant, invisible cricket sitting on his shoulder going, are you sure you want to say that? Are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure you want to go in there? You know, this is an echo chamber for this guy. And it is for many people that are like this. So he said, okay, I can do that. I said, good, because you have to do it. Otherwise, you're basically emotionally on the side of a cliff holding on, and you can only do that for so long before your weight and gravity pulls you off the cliff. I said, so if you don't do something, you're going to fall, which means you're either going to just one day wake up and decide you're not going in and you're going to quit on a voicemail, or you're going to get fired because you're completely unproductive because you're freezing. He goes, yep. And I said, that's the deal. So and then he said this to me. Well, I don't know if I really like what I'm doing. I said, okay, it sounds to me like this job's not working out for you and you feel bad because they brought you in, you accepted, and now you're going to let them down. He said, exactly. I said, well, the wonderful thing about this, none of this is really your fault. He saw something in you. He wanted you to come in. I did eventually let him, once it was a done deal, they did the profile. So he knows how you're wired because I told him. So I doubt this is going to be news to him. I just think he doesn't have time to think about it. And he's going to help prepare your exit if that's what you're ultimately going to do. I said, but you do realize once you exit here, you're going to just go home and sit and wait for something to show up in your driveway. Okay, so how long do you want to do that? How's that going to go? Or you could stay here, work this out, and be making some money because they're paying you pretty well just because they have you in their back pocket for when things start really happening because they're in a growth spurt. And then you're going to be utilized. But right now, you're sort of on deck, all right? You're not up at bat. You're on deck, and you're bored. I get it. And you're dealing with a very aggressive style that makes you feel like you're getting your face kicked in every day. But if you can understand, that's how he deals with everybody. Like, there's a lot of things you need to understand and accept, and then redirect what your assumptions about all this, because assumption is life's lowest level of knowledge. It's what everybody does. So you need to understand what's actually going on. This really isn't about you, but you're in a really good position for somebody like you to be in a company like this and them keeping you because they think you're brilliant. I said, there's a lot of people that would want that. But you do realize that if you go through with this, you're going to throw all that away. Now, you may want to throw that away because you hate it, right? So I don't know where you are here. Only you know. But this is what you need to do. So I spent, 15 minutes on the phone helping him negotiate his next steps. And he'll do that. He's going to call me next week. We'll see where it's all at. But I said, you don't call me unless you had that conversation, because I'm not, because if I find out you didn't have that conversation, the call's going to end. And he said, okay. So he's likely going to do it. But the point I'm making is, and if you heard the last podcast I did on behavior, motivation, and free will, he wants things to be better. He wants a dream job like you do. Go get it then. Go get everything you want, right? You're a free will moral agent. You can do what you want. Your decisions are all yours. You don't have to put up with that, right? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? If you think for 1 minute life is that easy, you're crazy. And so this was an important call. And my heart cares for this guy. I feel bad for him because he's a little stuck. He's wading through mud waist deep in hip boots emotionally. And, he probably could use a little bit of therapy, some counseling. But anyway, that's the scenario. So you need to understand there's a lot of people like this in the world, and they don't really know what to do. They're waiting for inciting incidents to move them forward in their story. And if there's no inciting incident, guess what? They're not going anywhere. I was on a podcast a little while ago, and it was just released today. So what is today? Today is October 2nd. So I don't know the name of that podcast. It's something well-being, wellness. I don't know. I can't remember. But I did put it on Facebook. So if you're following me on Facebook, you could see that I came on that podcast today. And I talk about some of these things. You know, one of the things I talk about, one of the things she wanted to talk about, which if you listen to this, you're going to see my strategy here. She said, well, what happens when you have a passive person dealing with an aggressive leader and they have to go into a C-level person and have conversation with them, either by convincing them of something or asking them a question or trying to get information or whatever the case may be. And if you notice, I never directly answer her question. Because what she wanted me to do is say this, oh, just go do this. And then she could hand that off to the listeners, and then, you know, they've now got a handle on their mug. But what she starts to realize as we're talking, it's not that easy. That's not how all this works. And I told her during that appearance on her podcast that all this, self-awareness and coaching and consulting that's going on out there, how to get you to, running at optimal performance, and all this BS is a joke. Boots on the ground working is nothing like you see on Twitter and Facebook and all this, where you got all these rah-rah people dressed nice with a perfect haircut and a great cool photograph telling you how to live the best life possible. It's a tragedy that this crap is going on out there, because what I just described to you is boots on the ground individual that's brilliant. He's very smart. He aced his ACT or whatever the hell test they take at high school. This guy aced it. He got nothing wrong on it. And yet he can't even go in there and talk about his fears in work. This is life, folks. This is what's going on in every company on some level. And we got people running around talking about, oh, just change it. Oh, just do this and you'll be a superstar. I don't think so. So don't look at me as a naysayer. Look at me as a truth-sayer, because that's what I am. And when people call in here, I help them understand, here's the deal. Here's the way you are. If you're not going to work on this, your life's going to suck. So you need to do something. And here's how you have a conversation like this. And I have to spoon feed him in the beginning until he can feed himself. Everybody's brain is a baby in their weakness, in their area of weakness. And it has to become a toddler, and then it has to become a child, and then it has to become a teen, and then it has to become an adult. That doesn't happen tomorrow. It's a process. So people need to be processed through in an effort to be their best self, and they have to accept themselves as who they are, not for who they or the world thinks they need to be. You've got to be comfortable with you, and you can't worry about what anybody else thinks. You just have to find a place where you can be you the best way and then get paid for it. So that's really the goal. That was like a little bit like a rant, I think. But anyway, this is going to be a short one because I'm done. So anyway, this is episode 16, and I told you a story, and I'm glad you tuned in. And I want you to stay tuned because we've got so much more to talk about. If you knew what was rolling around in my brain for the next several years of conversations here or monologues here, I don't know. I think you'd be excited. But we got a lot more to come. Thanks for tuning in. You've been listening to Behavioral Insights.